Hello, and welcome to our Wonkette live chat.
Well,
I'm Robyn Pennacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
thank you. Almost live.
Yes, almost live.
We
Oh,
are.
wasn't that a show?
Yes, it's in Seattle back maybe 30 or so years ago, and I was a big fan of it. There was a period where when Nirvana broke out, everything in Seattle was cool. So comedy
Oh, okay, yeah.
airing the series.
No, I remember that.
Yes.
Generally, those were during the days when we only got Comedy Central for half the day. I don't. I forget what the other half was, but we only got Comedy Central for half the day. On the cable that we had. It was weird. There were a few channels like that. We also had black box cable, so
So this has been quite the disturbing week. I think perhaps I don't know if you feel the same way. I think these events. So obviously, talking about the gun massacre, I find the fact that it's just something that's horrible, similar to like the wildfires that have occurred, or these horrible things that occur that there are clear solutions to, but half the nation will not permit any effort to actually address the solution rationally.
yeah, because they want the solution to be something that they want that has nothing to do with mass shootings or literally anything.
Buying more guns. You'd written something great, I think yesterday, just sort of breaking down all the BS, because it is a stalling tactic. A lot of people fall for it, which is just like a sitcom of just we should just only have one door, and
yeah,
that's to
oh my god,
drive you insane. It's like that's like the triangle shirtwaist fire. So now we're just
that's what I said. Like you can't like like kids like jumping out of windows to their deaths.
Like, one door, no windows.
Yeah.
I was at an event at my son's school yesterday. We were in the Northwest, so they don't actually have air conditioning in the school. So there were doors wide open because it was slightly warm. And there were days where they'd have to close the school because it would get so hot, thanks to global warming through the summer. So it's an absurd statement. Doesn't even work from a treating kids like they're prison inmates aspect, because they can just easily be lined up and murdered. And clearly the idea is just get rid
also, way to make it more difficult to get out.
Get rid of the guns is the obvious thing. So Lauren Boebert, who's legitimately stupid, she's not like trying to dodge the issue or delay or throw out. She actually believes it when she talks about, well, after 9/11, they didn't ban planes. Even though any of us who grew up, as you and I, enjoying romantic comedies, it's like, well, I can no longer rush to the gate to stop Robyn from leaving, boarding her plane. Please,
which is sad because I always wanted someone to do that.
Despite all my bad habits and traits, and I'm really an overgrown child, this grand romantic gesture should prove to you I'm going to change. We won't show it. We won't show it, but we'll, it'll have this grand reunion. But I can't, you can't do that anymore. They made active changes to make it harder to blow up planes. And
you still have to take your shoes off, which drives me insane. Unless you I have not bothered to spend the extra money it takes to not have an annoying boarding experience, which on some level is really messed up when you think about it. Like,
with cash, everything is possible. As Faye Weldon wrote in The Cloning of Joanna May, a book I enjoy. Yes, we have Travelers Plus because my wife traveled a lot of time in these days, and we got yes, it's a matter of paying enough money to prove you're not a threat, so you can about your shoes. My son uses a mobility aid. He's a walker, and he'll be like, well, can he walk through security without that? It's like, well, no, that's why he has this. He cannot actually do this. So every time we've flown, someone has been like, oh, well, he can't use that. It's like, well, no. And he's like 60 pounds now, so I can no longer literally pick him. He's gonna have to go through. So it's this whole travels become.
But of course, people can have their fake like emotional support raccoons and what have you.
And obviously travel is an important, this is weird idea because there's, you know, people will argue, conservatives, it's like, well, there's a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and we're not going to go into the many constitutional reasons why they don't know what they're talking about. It's really about how we didn't have a standing army at that point.
Yeah.
And they also didn't know, it would be like, it's like they would be like thinking of Star Trek technology if you're thinking about like an assault rifle compared to a musket, and they might have had different ideas. Also, someone who worked on the Bill of Rights was later murdered by a gun.
Yeah. But I mean, they actually literally had gun control at that time also. In fact, you had to, like, you know, they were always like, oh, well, they put it in there so that we could overthrow the government if someone started doing tyranny to us, like, you know, giving poor people health care. But like, you, in most states, you had to sign like a loyalty oath to that state, being, you know, like avowing your, you know, personal loyalty to the state and your not desire to not overthrow it, like, in order to get one.
And also the guy, it's just an incredible, this notion that I like, even the Civil War would be very short now because Lincoln let's say, well, freeze all their assets. Like, that's like a memo. He just asked the intern, some geek, it's like, hey, can you just freeze all the Southerners' assets and they can't buy bullet? Like, you know, it's a fundamentally different. Oh, and we have planes.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go and bomb. I'm gonna send a drone and just bomb their key.
The thing that I thought was actually that
like a day.
The thing that killed me once was I got into an argument online with some idiot when, like, generally I avoid arguments. Sometimes I have like really bad PMS and just want to argue with like terrible people. And I said something about, like, you know, the government has nukes, and they were like, does that mean that you're okay with the government nuking American citizens? And I'm like, obviously not.
No.
My first personal memory is of being at a nuclear arms protest of some kind involving a giant clam. I don't really understand what was going on there, but I just pictured the giant clam.
You're just recognizing that the government has nukes, and they have drones and tanks and
an entire standing army, both the National Guard and the regular kind.
It's a very different situation, but that's that weekend warrior aspect, and it does deal with the aspect of, you know, this psychopath in Texas when he went and bought 2 assault rifles, and like 357 ammunition. His intent was to use that as design, which to kill a lot of people.
Yeah,
and live in this fantasy world of, oh, well, maybe he was going to go and just put it against his wall like some neat modern art, like Lauren Boebert did.
Yeah,
the gun fetishing, which is the, you know, essentially the best case scenario is 95 or whatever % of Americans who buy assault rifles do so for silly reasons, which is just to kind of hold it. And
except for the feral pigs, Stephen. Except for the feral pigs.
I saw that. That was insane. That's like with the Grizzlies, right? Like, should have guns.
They're always bringing up feral pigs, and like, you know, fine. If like we could have an exception for people who could have a provable interest in keeping feral pigs off of their property, or, you know, just really liked that one Nicolas Cage movie. You know, that's
that's Japan, right? Like, Japan says, like, well, why do you need this? And he would like not be able to get through the application without revealing that he's a psychopath. I mean, that's part of the challenge with our current background checks, which is, and it's supposed to be very clear here, Texas has made it easier for bad people to get guns over the past, and I define bad people getting guns as anyone who wants to buy these rifles. They made it demonstrably easier, like essentially no license, 18-year-olds, even if you can't buy alcohol,
a handgun.
guns.
Actually, you can't buy a handgun at 18. You can't buy a handgun in Texas until you're 21, but you can buy an assault rifle.
Yes, that's quite the loophole of insanity. And, you know, they don't make going back to think of how hard it would be for you to even get any sort of medical procedure. Like, we're talking weeks. Like, I'm middle-aged, I have to do all the sort of middle-aged stuff. I've got to go and see one doctor to get a referral to see a specialist to do this. We talk about weeks. Here you can get all this within a week. He got all of this within a week. And home ownership, which I consider more of a human right than the right to kill people.
Yeah.
Way
more difficult.
Very hard. Like, essentially, forget even trying to get a mortgage and closing on a home. That's several months. We're talking just when I lived in New York, especially, it was very hard. They want, and the worst that can happen is that you don't make rent. Like, someone loses money on you. It's a bad bet.
It's harder to get a legit Kinder Egg. We can't there aren't prizes in cereal anymore because someone might choke, which I still find odd because they were pretty big. I'm not going to say anything, but that is, you know, I get why they did that. I'm slightly disappointed because I did like getting prizes out of cereal boxes, but even like as an adult, I feel I would enjoy that. But like, I'm okay with giving that up so that a kid doesn't choke to death.
It's just totally fair, even though, you know, I often have alluded, I have to stop saying it because it's so dated as a reference. My mother would often say, when frustrated with a driver, that he got his license out of a box of cereal.
Yeah.
And now is no longer a reference that anyone understands. Like, well, why would anyone have anything free in cereal? No one does, because someone might choke. We make things to prevent massive death, and this kid should never. Every story about him, and I've heard the bullying stuff, and it's always white guys who are bullied, often for legitimate reasons. The bullying defined as ostracization because this person is freaking disturbed in certain cases and not to be around, and that's fine. Look, but often, you know, if you're a Black person or who's been at schools and as the only person there, and the bullying you've experienced, or trans kids or gay kids, and we aren't blowing up, murdering people and blowing up schools. This is sort of a very specific, as Paul Schrader said about Travis Bickle, certain type of white guy.
Yeah. Also, one thing that is related to that I'd like to bring up is that Candace Owens, her whole thing was basically that this is happening because we're not bullying people enough. Basically, because she was like, this is happening because trans people exist and people are just letting it happen, and there are fat people who are leaving the house, and, you know, Cosmopolitan thinks it's okay for them to exercise. Like, it was completely insane. And her basic argument was that, like, we need to bully people more so that fewer people do mass shootings. Like, if we were more terrible to trans people and fat people, then there would not be any school shootings. And I feel like that's probably not true.
No, it is not. I mean, Republicans seem to want this world. I've seen this a lot when they talk about we need to find God or find Jesus. And it's like, well, to me, and I'm an atheist, but part of finding Jesus and God would be not wanting to murder his creations.
Yeah.
You know, for stealing my car. Like, that's what this is about, right? Like, you talk about these guns. It's like, I've got to, you know, I can't reason with my government. I need to be able to kill them. I can't, you know, someone's breaking into my house, and we're not talking about, it is very rarely like some sort of purge situation that people are breaking in homes. That's not.
Usually people who break into homes wait until you're not there.
They want to steal your stuff. And I like my stuff, but not enough to kill someone. I just want to get out.
Yeah.
And my stuff I have there, you know, that for security, I have a Simply Safe, have the motion detector lights, is to scare folks away. It doesn't work, if they somehow get in, you know, I've got video cameras to find all of that, but I don't want to kill anyone. And it is hard to kill anyone. And even
in the dark, like,
look, especially if you have children in your home and you're storing a gun correctly, you've got to have it. You got to have it in the safe and all of that. Look, if you wish to do that, and I don't believe you should be able to take it out of your house and out in the street, that's one thing. But these assault rifles are meant to kill a lot of people quickly. There is no saying. So in this weird way of how do we, as Republicans say, we want the world to be so nice and loving and God-fearing that we all have assault rifles that we're not going to use, which doesn't
like
make
mutually assured destruction. Like we're all in a Cold War with each other.
Exactly. Like maybe that's the only thing. Like the first step toward your godliness and love and all this sort of crap they're saying would be getting rid of the guns and believing that you can solve your problems without military style weapon. Like how about some diplomacy? But instead, that's the only purpose for these things. And they've linked that with handguns, with the most basic, what people could argue is a form of self-defense. They always trot out women who, sexual assault and guns, despite statistics being that that's often used against them. But whatever, it's like, look, but we're not talking about a handgun, because again, a handgun would have been a far different situation. In this scenario, these are, military, gear. They're selling like armor-piercing bullets. They sell body armor that this guy didn't have because he had, fortunately, to have these Keystone cops that weren't going to bother engaging with him. But assault rifles should be banned. They are fundamentally a threat to national security.
For the same reason they banned machine guns, like because they banned machine guns because people were, machine gunning people down, and it was a bad time, so they banned them. So like, there's not even that much of a difference in terms of like the reasoning behind banning machine guns versus banning assault rifles. Which they're like, oh no, it stands for Armalite rifle. I'm like, motherfuckers, you have been using assault rifle for years. You have magazines called Assault Rifle Magazine.
Oh yeah.
I have a picture of them. Like you're just mad that we started pointing out to you that this was kind of a horrific term for anything.
Yeah, it's complete. So, well, what about more security? All the areas that have been like, how can we imprison children so that you can have the right to have assault rifles at every level? So again,
like kids have to live in a police state.
Yes, because you can't trust anyone around you, because these are so great, and the fetishization of them, and these assault rifles that no sane person should have access to, and demonstrably it's insane people who want them. And I often use the example of in '76 when Taxi Driver came out, Travis Bickle gets the guns illegally. Like he doesn't just walk into a gun store, and that could happen now. Like that character in Texas, Travis Bickle walks into a gun store. It's like, I want the 44 Magnum. I want this. I want the assault rifles. Because then, even in the '70s, he was just mostly assault rifles or other things, hand cannons, not literal weapons. But the point of this scene, Taxi Driver, when he's getting all these weapons, is to convey very clearly this person is fucked up. He's not well. You don't get an arsenal and impose in front of your mirror and talking about, a real rain coming down unless you are not well. Like you mean to warfare against people. And this, none of the background checks, relevant background checks would be, why do you want this? Why are you getting this? What do you hope to achieve? Anyone who knows, because every time these guys kill someone, they just interview 5 people. So like you and I covering the case within 2 days can assemble enough, material so that people reading it are like, wow, this guy was nuts. And it's like, well, yeah, so maybe that's part of the background check. We can actually do that.
One thing that I will say, I think, is, the whole background check thing itself is difficult. Republicans like to push this idea that, oh, it's mentally ill people. Those people, most of the mass shooters do not have like a, you know, diagnosable official mental illness, for the most part, people, you know, with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of crimes than perpetrators. You know, you're more likely, if you have depression, you're more likely to be purchasing a gun to kill yourself, which is another reason guns are bad. But and why I would not ever want to have one around me ever, because I could just be having a real bad day. Why would I want that option?
Oh, yes. And the ACLU, unfortunately, I disagreed with them on this. I disagreed with some Wonkette commenters who got upset with me about saying, including the mentally ill and the people. I don't want anyone to have guns, so I'm not actually.
This is the thing. I don't want anyone to have guns, but I also don't want mental illness or neurodiversity to be stigmatized.
Exactly.
Because,
like, as anyone, as you were saying, I think it is fair to certain people, the risk of having a gun in their home is, so it's fine to be like, these are certain folks that probably, if we're going to have.
I don't think literally anyone should have a gun like that in their home. And yes, I do think that there should be background checks, but at the same time, I don't think that I think the better solution, rather than stigmatizing mental health, which, conservatives love to do, they love to be like, no, these people are all just crazy. All of us regular gun owners whose kids are regularly blowing each other's heads off because we left our guns out, we are fine.
Because they're not defining it well, right? Like, what is, like, your gun fetish of having guns in your home particularly well. I think
the kid in Buffalo didn't have anything, like, he was basically just spouting Fox News talking points. So, like, how do you say, like, oh, this person spouting Tucker Carlson's nonsense is totally fine. This other one, however, not sure.
No, I mean, the lowest, so to your point, I think the lowest fruit is sort of obviously, and I feel strongly about this, is having people close to me who've had struggles with mental health issues. You can list the folks who have unfortunately successfully taken their life because they were able to access guns. And a lot of the red flag laws are meant to deal with that as well. That's been somewhat gendered. I won't gender it. I will say that they've proven, obviously, that the attempted suicides that work tend to involve guns because,
well, that's one of the reasons why men actually have a much higher successful suicide rate, but women are more like, just statistics, women are more likely to engage in suicidal ideation while men are more likely to successfully commit suicide. And a big reason for that is guns. Like, the more access you have to guns, in any state, the higher the suicide rate is. And we actually know there have been all these studies showing that oh my God, I'm losing the term right now in my head. There was the British gas study that basically determined that there were fewer suicides after they stopped having gas-powered ovens.
I think you'd written about that as well.
Yeah, I've written about it a lot because it's just an interesting thing. So we know that sort of thing works.
Yeah.
You give people an extra minute to think things through. The harder it is to do something like that, the less likely they are to do it.
Well, guns are very efficient at killing people. So as opposed to slitting your wrist, someone can find you. There's ways, even a carbon monoxide thing in the car. There's ways to but putting a gun in your mouth and other methods, sorry to be triggering for those people, it is no backseas often in those situations. So, with one of the challenges with, as you were saying, the Buffalo shooting, is that psychopathic behavior is not mental illness. And that disturbs me when it's linked, because they will later try these people specifically as perfectly sane. It's like, well, what was it? Like, obviously, you're not saying that they are, from a legal standpoint, mental illness means that you cannot really functionally plan. And
so in terms of pleading guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect, the rule is that it has to be that you did not know right from wrong because of that. And it has to be, like, the definition of criminal insanity is very different from like I couldn't be like, oh, hey, I went out and murdered some people, but it's totally cool because I have several diagnosed mental health issues. Like, no, there's gonna be like, no, lady, you just have like ADHD and anxiety and depression, like literally every other person your age.
Oh yeah.
Like that's not what criminal insanity is. But also at the same time, a psychopathy is not necessarily a mental illness, it's a personality disorder. And even most psychopaths are not violent. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time, these people are, it's a situational thing rather than, an issue with their own brain. It's not like, they have like chemical issues in their brain that make them this particular way. They don't, it's not like they have schizophrenia. Even James Holmes, the Aurora shooter, legitimately did have mental illness issues, but it was determined that he couldn't plead insanity because that had nothing to do with his crime.
No, it's not like, and this is it's not as if you believe that everyone around you is like an alien, like you functionally aren't connected to the reality, like you're that removed from reality. You are damaged perhaps in certain ways, but you do comprehend right and wrong, and you make bad choices. And I think the media promotes a lot of this, I think perhaps enabled by this aspect that people don't want to accept. And Law and Order did a story, an episode about this years ago, where the idea is that the guy tried to plead insanity because he, racism is he was so horribly racist. How could anyone? It's like, well, no, it is.
Yeah, racism is not a mental illness.
No, it's a character flaw, and at every version of the Batman villain, the Joker, likes to present him as, oh, he's crazy, and it's like, well, no, you literally like everything he does is pretty much premeditated. He's very aware of right and wrong. He often gives big speeches.
He's an organized criminal, as they would say.
About right and wrong, and how he's proving that being right is wrong and all that sort of stuff. So he's pretty much sane. He
has an ethos.
Yeah.
And the thing is, these people all have ethoses. They're all like, they're not, for the most part, they're not just doing it because they're bloodthirsty. They're doing it because, people are going to, they're going to replace white people, or I'm mad at women because, not all of the women want to bang me. And it's always, these men who, for the most part, feel like, the world isn't, where is the world I was promised? Like,
well, and I think this goes to sort of the larger point I think we're making here, and you touched upon this. And there was when the GOP sort of opposed making domestic terrorism bill, blocked the domestic terrorism bill because it'd be hurtful to white supremacists or whatever, is that a lot of the right has embraced an ethos that for us would read as, this is going to go down the line to violence. This will lead to violence. And if you have a background check that involves sitting with a therapist, like that was what I used to say. Like, okay, well, I wanted to be so hard to get a gun. It should be like a months-long process. You sit down, have to go for all this. And what I've kind of come to recently is that, well, all that would reveal and Republicans would oppose is essentially very most likely, often in many cases, right-wing or types of, this person has all this misogyny and hatred of women, and it's inevitable that will lead to violence. It's like, well, no, this is the left trying to punish people who aren't like them. And so that is the dilemma. So you just wind up with these, to me, toothless way, because there is the catch-22 is, to me, the purchase this person made was not sane. It is not sane,
it's not reasonable
to buy these. He used those weapons as they are designed to be used, and that is the American is that we are trying to pretend that there is some noble reason to purchase, and it's not. It's sick. And we have the NRA convention with fetishizing assault rifles, all this stuff. your intent is to kill someone. That's what you want for those things. And so,
or feral pigs,
or feral. Yeah. So you know that there's no the toothlessness of those things, because it's pretty easy for a lot of these guys, especially if we live in a world where a suburban white kid, no matter what his problems, is most likely not going to have a criminal record, as opposed to a young minority from the neighborhood might have been stopped and frisked, all sorts of things that could be, oh, you don't get a gun, whereas he's not necessarily as much of a threat as this kid who's been living in his mom's, whatever. But there is no way, based on anything they will recommend. So when people like Rubio and others very cynically talk about how these laws won't change anything, to a degree they're right, because we just won't get rid of the guns. We need to ban the assault rifles because they fundamentally do more harm.
They do more damage. Like, they make it easy. If you want to kill 30 people in 6 seconds, that's what you use, not a handgun. Like,
yes, we got, and with Texas, so open carry. So someone approaching you with lots of guns, is that illegal? No. So you can't necessarily shoot this person just because they're armed for bear. In fact, they love going out in public, intimidating people at with carrying an assault rifle and saying this is freedom. So the good guy with a gun, if such a concept exists, can't see and like, oh, I need to get a gun away from this person. I mean, even Kyle Rittenhouse.
Or like, because they're like, yeah, we're terrorizing you because we are, and you need to respect that we're actually protecting you, even though you're fucking terrified of us.
Kyle Rittenhouse was able to show up with a gun we probably should not have had in a area and say, oh, it's all self-defense. No one has the right to look at me and be threatened, and they're trying to take the gun away from me. Oh no, they're going to kill me. And that fear, and leading us to the larger issue, makes them perfect for police work, right? Because we've seen that cops are cowards. And I've written about this for years. Everyone gets upset about it, but like, it's fundamentally, I think that, have you noticed that people seem more shocked by just the cops' cowardice regarding lying? But to me, it's a direct line. Like, if you're someone whose ethos, and this is how part of their training, is that the most important thing in the world is to get home safely at the end of your shift. They train that into them for specifically, often for the purpose of when people would ask, well, when you pulled over, maybe the lady was just reaching, the black lady was just kind of reaching over for a lipstick, not a gun. Maybe the 12-year-old had a toy gun. Maybe you could have waited a few minutes. And oh no, if I did that, I might not have gone home at the end of my shift. So it is a fundamentally sociopathic way of viewing the world, right? And there's a pretty easy to direct line that to, why would I rush into this building and sacrifice my own safety for the safety of children? Many of them
no, it's the same thing.
Begging for help. So, they are cowards. We're sort of revealed very well to be cowards. And we should not that I have that much faith in the police, but probably shouldn't sell weapons so that an 18-year-old with no other real training, it's not like all those movies in the 90s, former, like John Malkovich in The Line of Fire, who's some sort of former trained professional and dangerous and all this sort of stuff. All those movies like that, like he's not the Joker. He's just all he has is these weapons, and that still makes him so dangerous that these cops are terrified. Maybe this guy should not have this gun, because that makes there's no equalizer for it that we can do anything with. So that would be great for, I wish that our leaders were seizing upon this more, but they are on holiday. It's just so.
And the only person getting attention for being willing to consider gun control now is Mitch McConnell. But
it's not the same banana.
The InfoWars is real mad at him, by the way. They are not happy.
Same banana in the tailpipe, right? They did this with police reform, and they put Tim Scott, and he worked with Democrats on something up until the election. So you couldn't really campaign. They was like, no, we are not racist. We totally want police reform. We're working on police reform. And they pulled the plug at the most convenient moment. And that's what they're doing now. They have and it will be some sort of bowdlerized, ridiculous process, at best when engaging with them, or at worst, nothing. And it's not like, well, when will you learn that they are fundamentally bad actors? Like, Republicans are not interested in making guns less available. Like the gun lobby wants to sell guns.
Yeah.
Their base wants to protect.
They want to sell as many guns as possible, just like literally every other industry. They're not, that's how selling things works. That's how capitalism works. They're not like, the only reason we want to sell these things is because we care about everyone's safety. No, they want to sell things because it makes them fucking money. They're fine with all these kids getting the AR-15s because, sadly, probably the more mass shootings happen with these rifles, the more they sell. I should probably look into that because I bet you it's true.
Oh, yeah, there's been studies. There is this fear of the left that is never panned out by the left's actions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whenever this occurs, they run out and buy more death machines because they know that Obama, Biden, Clinton, who was never elected, but someone is going to come for their guns and take them. And there's been that won't happen. It hasn't happened. And it is, we are losing the messaging battle. And you can blame the media, you can blame the voters, but fundamentally, Democrats have to come to a room and figure out how are we losing this battle, where when Rick Scott says, I am going to tax the F out of everyone, and they can just be like, no, we're not going to do that. And the voters, okay, well, yeah. I mean, they said they're not going to do that, even though it's actually written somewhere down or whatever. And then when, Democrats will say, we're totally not defunding the police. We love the cops. I'm romantically involved with a cop. Don't worry. They still don't, the voters at large still don't believe them. And I had a whole thing of this of just, can you imagine? So when the whole defund thing was happening and everyone, all the adults in the room claim that reason alone is why we, Democrats suffered any sort of election losses. It's imagining a world where Cori Bush could be asked, it's like, well, what's going to happen if you get rid of the police? Like, who's going to protect you? What's going to happen? She was like, well, the problem is not that, once we get rid of the cops, what we should do is that every American home should have only one door, because then no one can break in.
But here's something I want to point out. You don't see every Republican on earth being like, just so you know, that one thing in Rick Scott's proposal, we're not going to do that. And repeating it over and over and over again, because I hate to say it, the more they repeat it and say oh no, we're absolutely not doing this, the more it keeps it in, the consciousness.
Oh, absolutely.
Although
that's a communication issue as well.
What is funding doing? Really, what is all of this money that we're throwing at police officers doing? I don't see it doing much.
No, they're only in this for beating up. They tase the parents. Taking their children. They
have all the funding they want, and Texas has all the goddamn guns they want, and this still happened. Clearly, their way doesn't work. That is the logical conclusion to be reached here, but they just want to keep pretending that oh yeah, no, these things that we say work will totally work. Cops in schools would be great, even though that tends to actually lead more to kids getting arrested than shooters.
Beat up kids. And, but every school like a prison, and then people are like, I don't want my kid in a prison, so that just helps to further dismantle schools.
They do want public schools to suck. They do want that because they want charter schools and they want homeschooling.
I can't send my kid to a school with one door and a bunch of cops. That's a bad scene. So, I mean, they want,
especially in Florida, where 7-year-olds can be sent to prison.
Yeah. So they do want to make this worse. Yeah. I don't. So all the adults in the room have this concept of, and this one guy just was going, well, what do you know that Chuck Schumer doesn't? And I feel like there's a lot of, someone had a comment about this, of how Democrats struggle, and liberals, in all of liberals, not even so much Democrats, but liberals struggle from being annoying. So, like, in certain ways, like, if you were with Lauren Boebert, she might be less annoying than a liberal who is telling you how stupid you are and how intellectually superior they are. And especially because it just comes across as if, and we've actually learned nothing from the past 6 years. So there's this whole sort of elitism of everyone who's in charge, they know the best. And what was Trump's? It's so weird, right? So everyone focuses on Trump commenting about the Mexicans being rapists and sort of forth. And that's terrible. Yes, but fundamentally, he also said, people are laughing at us. People make fun of America. We're failing. He actually called out that there are problems with the country. And he said that they're laughing at you and they don't know what they're doing, and which reinforces a sort of, and the counter that being, no, we do know better than you. It's just not a very compelling argument. And that comes across, especially like, well, what's the win record for Schumer here? Like, why am I supposed to believe and I supposed to, and it often has this sense of other white guys telling, often people of color, myself or women or whatever, that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
White guys in charge know everything. Because, I struggle to think that President Warren and, let's say, Majority Leader Klobuchar, after, the past 2 years, would get the benefit of the doubt from random white guys that, well, of course they know what they're doing. Well, everything's on fire. No, we'd be like, no, everything's on fire. We're getting our asses kicked. These ladies don't know what they're doing. But there's an inherent sense of, we can obviously point out that the ladies are wrong or the minorities are wrong, but certainly not these sainted white men. Even though everything
they understand things that we will never understand because they are part of the establishment.
Yeah, it is like a weird, the common thing, and as Alvarula said about Blue MAGA, is the sort of, this is how sorts of things done. Like, Beto's stunt was pointless. Just trying to make yourself feel good. What's important is to go out and vote some more. And Adam Conover, who's great, had pointed out that it's not just voting that helped the gun lobby, anti-abortion lobby. It was fierce activism. They were like everywhere, and the sense of where the Democratic Party has sort of suppressed activism. It's that activism is bad unless it's in grainy black and white footage from the 60s. But activism.
But even that, those people were kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, so
the good ones learned better and became yuppies, like Jerry Rubin.
Exactly. You're supposed to like create a sense of a narrative, in that, and Republicans have been doing that for the past 2 years, and we have not been. And when you're like, well, okay, you do something, Twitter. How would you get Manchin and Sinema to something? Okay, well, if your argument is that the Democratic president, is being outmaneuvered by a Dixiecrat and a first-term senator, that looks
not great.
Yeah, the average person, and I say that I am not a DeSantis fan. I'm saying the average person. So you get a lot of voters are non-ideological. They're not part of teams. I think Trump understood this, so he made it that everyone's part of his team. But the non-ideological voter, someone from Ohio working at Walmart, comes in. What she might see is that Ron DeSantis picks fights with Disney. Says, fuck you, Disney. I'm doing it my way. His own GOP legislator. Here's our racist congressional map. No, make it more racist.
Yeah.
Like, damn right. Like, and to me, I'm seeing weakness of where, what can we do? I can't, man, it's a shame that everyone with a uterus is losing their body autonomy, and now these kids are getting shot. Oh, what? But Manchin and Sinema.
All the things are said, yeah. But what can we do? They said no.
And what can we do? And then DeSantis is like the past 2 years of his leadership, and you're going to say that we're going to put that up against that, and then just lecture you as to why that's not. I don't see how that's effective, because DeSantis does not look weak. That doesn't mean that I'm saying go be a horrible person. I'm just saying, why don't you be strong for things that are good?
Yeah. And you don't see them having any problem, attacking Mitt Romney or Liz Cheney. No, that's fine. But oh my God, no, everyone has to be really nice to Manchin and Sinema, or they're gonna leave us and become Republicans.
It will join the party. So that we've often say this here, but it's just the logic of it, right? So, well, young people, you've got to go out and vote. I don't know. I feel dispirited. No, stand in that line forever and vote against the fascists. They're fascists and they're evil. It's like, okay, well, why don't you push more pressure on Manchin and Sinema? No, because then they will go and join the fascists. Really? But you said they're evil. Yeah. Why were they joining?
Fucking send them a message. Send Joe Manchin a fish wrapped in a newspaper. That is, that man has shit. But I'm sorry, send get someone to look into whoever he's banging, possibly, and be like, oh, we're gonna let people know about that if you, unless you get rid of the filibuster. Actually do, some threats would be nice, is all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. And the realization I've had is that despite blaming Manchin and Sinema for why we have not protected voting rights, protected abortion rights, and now, done something really realistic about gun rights, is because of Manchin and Sinema. But Biden and Schumer, and likely Pelosi, will endorse both of them against any primary challenge in 2024. And Manchin, you could say, is the best you can do, whatever, fine. But even against Sinema, they will, because Biden had in a wonderful kind of screw yourself twice, he endorsed Schrader, one of the 9 House Republicans who sabotage Build Back Better. And that still didn't work. The guy still lost because the guy was he was just a corporate stooge, and he voted against, helping prescription drug prices. He was just far more. This is a district. It's changed because it's gotten a little bit even more liberal because they've added Bend. But before, it was a district that Biden had carried 10 points. And again, it's like DeSantis would not do that. Forget Trump. Let's say DeSantis is the future of the party. DeSantis would not do DeSantis would be like, F this guy. And it just makes your sense of the courage or convictions. But it's that, as you've said, it's a country club mentality, right? So DeSantis and Trump are so coarse. They're bad at the country club. But here in the country club, once you're in, no matter what, we're going to support you. And that's great if the world is a country club. But when you're talking about, when you're talking about the same week that children were slaughtered, Clyburn and Pelosi are pulling out the stops to help a guy squeak through who's pro-NRA and anti-abortion against a candidate who could have been a reliable Democrat and obviously wasn't those two things.
And here's one thing that I will say. I have never in my life ever seen Republicans go, oh no, we can't, this person is too conservative to try and win in this area, because they wouldn't talk down their own policies like that, because they always act as if their policies, the most right-wing policies, are the policies that everyone wants. So they would never say it like that. They would never say, oh,
it's never
we need a Republican who's pro-choice in this area because they are very liberal.
No, it's never ideological. No. It is sometimes classist, like, oh, Herschel Walker doesn't talk too good and that's embarrassing, or maybe this and so forth. But it's never like what he believes is wrong. Like, and that goes back to the same elitism. And that's been my concern since 2016 has been that the Democratic Party sort of, and I get the sort of all hands on deck feel, but what happened was like, oh, all these lever Trumpers come join us. They just became a kind of potentially the public facing elitism. We're all college educated, we're all elitist, and we are going to talk down to certain people. And I will beg people, like, don't go after how Herschel Walker speaks, or don't that's pointless. And they can't help them, like Robyn, they can't help themselves. It's like, oh God, I'll have this post, whatever. It's like, well, please.
It's like people, okay, non-political. It's like people who are so sure that it is a completely classy move to publicly correct people's spelling, and that probably everyone is looking at that and being like, that's the cool person. That I want to be like them. I want to be like that person who spotted that one error and told that person about it. And yeah, some people are like that. Some people are like, oh man, that would be so cool because then I would feel better than other people. But generally speaking, everyone else thinks you're an asshole.
No one likes that. And it's not. And what I will say is like, okay, well, how can we run against him? It's like, well, if you want to run against Walker, I would suggest Warnock is a positive campaign. Warnock's a great guy. Here's what he's done. Focus on that. And also, because he didn't actually get that personal against Loeffler. He was running a positive campaign, and she was being negative. And if you want to go after Walker, treat him as if what he says is no different from what Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley says.
Yeah, and they can't. Exactly.
Like, well, Ted Cruz, blah, blah, blah. And all I'm hearing is white guy from Harvard. That's what I'm hearing, the Ivy League stuff. And so that is like, oh, well, Ted Cruz is obviously a genius. Well, the guy's talking about door control. So obviously the problem is Walker's policy. So yeah, it's a word salad. Fine. Same with Green. Fine. The problem is that what they're advocating for is fundamentally insane. So what he is saying is extremist and radical, and attack it as you would an extremist radical position from your Harvard educated Ivy League.
You know who was also Harvard educated? The Unabomber.
Yeah. So the idea that he talks dumb, he's dumb and whatever. And especially it's like, okay, well, that he is, I don't know how often you need to lose in these scenarios before you realize that that is not the best tactic to take. And, Boebert is certainly dumb in certain ways, something to do with her academic credentials. But again, her extremism and her bigotry, I think also because those things are what makes someone, it's the underdog is someone who people are laughing at. So I think when people talk about how Al Bundy was beloved, it's like, oh, he was an underdog. The whole show was like everyone was laughing at him. And it wasn't so much he was a powerful guy saying bigoted things about France or gay people or whatever. It was, we're all laughing at him. And that makes him inherently more endearing in a certain way. So why are you doing this to these other people of like, oh, Dr. Oz is a flake? It's like, well, he is a commie, as a charlatan, but he's also a radical who is going to do whatever Trump tells him. So at least go after them in these ways. But the respectability.
Actually, the way that they should go after Oz, I'm telling that is that these QAnon people do not like him because A, they think Oprah eats babies, and B, they found a picture of him with Marina Abramovich, which is absolute proof that he too enjoys eating babies because she was at the center. Because they were like, oh man, performance art, that is real Satanism. we totally understand what performance art is. To be fair, I don't really understand what performance art is or care for it. I'm sorry. I hate Laurie Anderson. I hate her, except for the fact that I do find it incredibly funny. I like the song about like, cuckoo, it's cold outside, don't forget your mittens. Not because I think it's good, but because that is hilarious. And I thought it was a joke and it wasn't. People don't, you know, I'm getting a little off topic, but like, you know, yeah, I understand that people don't know what the fuck performance art is. And that they are like, oh man, spirit cooking, that's going to be some sort of crazy satanic thing. And I don't, you know, obviously I don't think that, but like, you know, this idea that everyone is aspiring to be super sophisticated and, you know, is not necessarily the truth of the world. Like, that's not actually what everyone is into.
Let me ask you something else. So someone on Twitter, again, I won't say the person's name, had this whole tweet thread about often, I call it one of the other big lies of electioneering, which is that Republicans are all very responsible voters who vote, who just take their medicine and vote. And despite all
I don't think that's true.
There's just no evidence of this. And that Democrats, specifically progressives are always the bad ones here, don't understand how power works. Republicans do. They go out, they vote every time. Democrats don't. And that's what's, and then it breaks down, the thread goes on, and this person, she talks about how, well, we almost passed BBB, and all we needed is more voters, but progressives won't understand that. And same with like, well, we you know, we could have had this, and they got upset about the you know, public option. This kind of idea that progressive all Baruch assaults or so.
Yeah, the public option is actively bad. It is bad. It is a terrible idea. If you actually ever want universal health care to happen, you should like run screaming away from a public option. And that is one thing that I can tell you for sure. No, that is not true. And if that were true, we would have had President Mitt Romney and President John McCain.
There's aside from that the obvious data, and then there's a sense of these folks. If you break down the past 20 years, Republicans have had the White House for 12 so far since 2001, Democrats for 10, and we've actually had the Senate longer. About the difference with the House, Republicans maybe a little bit longer. So it's not a fundamental case of over the past 20 years, thanks to spoiled progressives, Republicans have run roughshod. It's like you've almost sort of shared power. It's just that when they've had power, Republicans
have
done the ball and have blocked and have obstructed and not tried to have, you know, make-out sessions with the other party, like the good old days where you could kind of, you know, play telephone with or whatever, post office with segregationists or whatever they were doing. So, you know, it's but and now it's surprising to me because it's like I'm fine with someone disagreeing with me, fine, but it's like when it's like, well, I don't. This is not. It's a reflection of the world. It's fundamentally just seems scary to me, right? When someone's you're this.
Well, because they're making up a thing that isn't happening, and I understand. Here's the thing. Here's what I think is going on. They're seeing Republicans vote for all of these wacky people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and everything, and they're assuming that people are like, we understand they're terrible, but we're just going to suck it up and go and vote for them. No, they genuinely like those people. Like, no one is just sucking it up to go vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene. They are so excited to go vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene.
The controversial argument is that with Trump and arguably Obama and with others, the idea is that your irregular voters, the ones who are very into a person, they vote for that person, and the folks who are just like, look, I am a hardcore Democrat, hardcore Republican, I'm going to vote forever. That's what happened with Trump. They will vote for that person. And Democrats want it to be the reverse. They get very angry when it's the reverse. So you get these streams of like, oh, well, the youth vote cratered in 2016 compared to 2012, and it's cratering now. And this is because progressives are whiners. And I look at that and I'm just, well, I mean, 2008, 2012 was Obama. And then 2016 was like a 70-year-old former first late, like, and I like the gal, but like, I love Patti LuPone, but I presume she is not going to fill the same stadiums as Beyonce, right? Like, that's
okay, fine. I mean, it depends on the audience. I love, you know how I love her.
I love, but it's a sort of, I don't expect like a lot of the people I like to, and I'm seeing this of just like this expectation of like, well, Obama was a celebrity style candidate, young, had all of this, and that same that same degree of support should all flow to not just older candidates, but a candidate who, like in Biden's case, talks about hanging out with segregationists, just does, like, why do you think that would track? Like, why should he fundamentally have, okay, all on policy? Like, well, what is the policy that is appealing? And it just seems,
I mean, there are policies that are appealing, but I don't think that Democrats want much to do with them. You know, today on Twitter, I made the analogy about, you know, it was a bad idea for Democrats to not, you know, run on, you know, free trade agreements are bad and the Iraq war was bad. Like, and war in general is bad because that is very much the ethos of the current day. And I compared it to wearing a midi dress when you have fantastic legs. Although, to be fair, midi dresses look terrible on everyone. It's also like they're awful and you can't make any shoes work with them. I have like one that I thought was really cute and I keep trying to wear it and it's never like,
no, I'm not.
It's a bad time. And I'm probably like the height that can wear them because I'm, you know, 5'9", but no, hard pass. It's also a lot like people who, like, for the past several years, like bigger eyebrows have been in. The overplucked eyebrows have not been a thing for a long time. And it's there are people who like still overpluck because when they were kids, they got made fun of for having a unibrow.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's not the style anymore, and they have the ability to have that style, like more so than say I do. My sister had amazing Brooke Shields eyebrows, and it took me forever to like get her to grow them back. And it was, you know, just because they had that trauma from, oh, people made fun of me because of this one thing. And, you know, now, even though that one thing is in style, they're still like scared of it. And I think that is what happened with a lot of left-wing policies. Like a lot of Democrats went through this period where, you know, oh my God, being anti-war is like, you know, oh my God, no one wants to be seen as being anti-war. No one wants to be seen as, you know, anti-capitalist. And they're still like retaining the lessons and the feeling of, you know, that particular era without that still necessarily being the case.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of them are super rich and don't care.
And obviously there's been a youth movement towards the right. I mean, we have a sort of fossilized democratic leadership, and you have much younger, to the point where literally it's possible in 2024 it'll be Biden versus, you know, DeSantis, who's younger than I am. And this idea that, you know, a demographics, you know, no one, for young people, it's just like, oh, you should always vote Democratic, even though everyone kind of understands that every other demographic, you probably either need to reflect that demographic culturally or connect with them on a clear area of what's important to them. But telling young people, here's why you should vote for it. Again, negging is not the best method, nor is it's just sort of doing the same thing that is not working. So it's like, here's where you're losing working class Latinos, that number's still dwelling. You're losing young people, the perception of weakness from having you know, essentially home field. It's like we're being beaten on our own turf, right? Because we have the Congress and the White House. So these losses, it's not like we're away. The Republicans are playing on our turf and beating us. And the only argument is to say, well, people 20 years ago screwed up, which I think also is not particularly very compelling to young people as well.
Yes.
So I don't know. I want there to be a better solution. I just was very the idea of like not pressing the advantage by not,
Well, I'm hoping that more Democrats, like, Beto is not my personal favorite, but I'm hoping that, that sort of thing becomes more of a thing. I think the way he handled this was 85,000 times better than a lot of Democrats have handled things previously, even if it was just like, sort of a, gambit because he's running for office.
He doesn't.
That kind of thing is really like, we need more of that. We need more showmanship. We need more like,
and the
hey, we're out here caring about things and doing stuff. And I feel like this is a really good opportunity for that. This is not opportunity, but it's like, show people who you are in crisis. And I think that that's really important. They're so afraid that Republicans are going to say,
you guys are bad. I'm saying he's like out there, you guys are bad. You did this. You should not be trusted. And I feel like it's that anger, but it's true. And so the expectation was he would, which, like Chris Murphy getting on his knees and begging Republicans to help him. It's like, why would they? He literally got down I'm on my knees, literally on my knees, begging you. And are like, whenever that happens, someone laughs at you. It's like what? Like where did you see that ever work anywhere?
Sorry, my brain just went to a Backstreet Boys place, but
but there are even now Democrats falling into the banana in a tailpipe of like, oh, Cornyn wants to talk about this, and everyone's really worried about their kids and whatever. And Beto's like not falling for it. It's like, I know you guys are crooks. You're just gonna like try to bury this along these dead kids, so that the 3 days will cool off. You can go back to pushing more guns. You can't be trusted. This is who you are. And the bipartisan chorus wants to be like, this is it. And they've shown where, Manchin has said that, but he also said that in 2018. Oh, this is different. I have a grandchild. He said it in 2012 after Sandy Hook, and then in 2018 after.
Well, take advantage of like the small amount of time that he is willing to do some shit and get some shit done. Like that is. And then just, if he doesn't do it, just show him various pictures of his grandchild.
Well, he won't. I will do anything except nuke the filibuster. He's a hack. Just to try to wind us down on somewhat of a positive note, I do. Adam Conover, go on his Twitter. He had a whole thing about about how the importance of activism. Joining these groups, that's what made the gun lobby one that you did not defy. It's not just about polling.
I would say,
polling. They look at polling. Doesn't matter if you, and Republicans have realized this. It's like, oh, well, most people want this. Well, they are still going to vote for me because I'm going to say the other candidate's a socialist who wants to turn their baby gay. So that's fine. So you've got to make it so that it is a death. You're signing your own death warrant or political death warrant. Obviously, we're in very violent times now. I don't mean literally. If you support, pro-gun policies or whatever. Obviously, the Democratic leadership support.
They have all these freaking conferences all the time. No, I feel like a hypocrite because I'm probably not a conference person, but we're not having. There's no like Democratic version of CPAC. There's no like. And there are, but they're smaller, and it's not like the big major thing that it is. We're not really having any sort of like, anything other than, hey, just come out and vote when the time is correct. And I don't think that that's psychologically smart. I don't think it's good for people. I think that people like to, rally. not necessarily the Trump kind of way, but like I think that people like to, you know, go and like get to know these people on, you know, more of a, you know, on a different level where they hear them speaking a lot and hear them, you know, hear a lot more from, you know, the people who are trying to change things. And I think that's really like actually important. We're the ones who started doing teach-ins in the first place. Let's have more of that. Like, let's have more things that people can participate in and feel like they're doing something and, you know, start like generating ideas rather than being like, oh no, we're so scared that Republicans are going to say something mean about it. That because they don't care that we make fun of CPAC. Do they care? No, they give literally no fucks. So we should be doing more shit like that.
Need our approval, and our disapproval they can kind of build into like how the elite doesn't like you.
Yeah.
So it is ideal to just go out there to advocate and more. I really wish the Democrats were pressing their advantage right now, not going home. To you know that doesn't. It's not a great look. Doesn't and especially because Republicans, their goal is to run out the clock on this, and so that nothing will change. No others. Yeah. But when you've got the combination of dead kids and you know police that have been demonstrated to be cowards, it's a great opportunity to press both those issues. Like, well, maybe maybe we are funding these cops too much. They aren't necessarily helping us. It's been proven case after case that they have no obligation, no legal obligation. None of those parents have any sort of grounds to sue these people, even though the irony being that the whole point of you're supposed to have guns is that all these good guys with guns, the parents who are personally invested, would have taken their arms and broken in down the school and hunted the kid down.
Yeah, and that didn't happen. Literally none of the things that they ever say, you know, will happen, including all the home invasions that don't really happen while people are home. I'm just saying, like, that's...
Yes. Well, that was what...
That's not how people do crime.
Well, that was... You recall this, Lindsey Graham, when they were doing after Sandy Hook and trying to get rid of assault rifles. He had this whole story of this poor lady who took out someone in her home invasion with an assault rifle. And it's like, well, if she had just had a handgun, she might have only wounded him. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Or it could have been her husband going downstairs for a glass of water. Like, guns are so much more likely to be used in either the murder of someone in that house or the suicide of someone in that house than it is, you know, than against an intruder. You know, that's...
Guns are...
It's not like, you know, Richard Ramirez is stalking the streets anymore. Actually, one of the things that I wrote about today was that, you know, they were trying to be like, oh, this is a whole new, you know, the mass shootings and everything are happening because feminism and men aren't being allowed to be masculine enough. And I'm like, male violence is not new. And in fact, like, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always the fault of feminism.
Feminists
technically I was writing about that on Friday, sorry. 2 days ago is when that was.
I think we've all accepted that this is in the past.
I know, I'm kidding. But, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Hating feminists.
Okay, well, no, the anti-feminist people, but then also, oh my God. No, I totally had a point and I lost that point somewhere in my head. Oh, the serial killers. Okay, so there's been a steep, I think like almost 85% decline in serial killers since the 1980s. And you've had a rather like a ton of mass shooters. And, you know, some of that is like a cultural trend. Some of that is because it's easier to take out a lot of people at once than it is these days to be a successful serial killer if you are not a long haul truck driver. Like, it's none of this is new. This male violence and like violence in general is not new. It's always existed. It's just like when it's what happens is like what things are more like easier to accomplish, really. Like it's not as easy to break into people's houses and murder them anymore, even if they don't have guns, because people have security systems and no one knows who has a security system or not. Like there's all these things that make it more people aren't, leaving their doors open at night anymore.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to, do serial killing than it used to be. And getting rid of these, ridiculous guns would make it a lot harder to pull off a successful mass shooting.
I think,
or mass murder.
Yeah, we should close out with just this: keep the doors, lose the guns. Like the doors, doors are your friends, especially French doors. I'm a big fan of those. Keep doors, lose friends. Hope you have a fun, probably crab-related cookout. You tend to talk about crabs a lot. So
we'll probably, I don't know. I have no idea what we'll do. It was just for a while, my sister and I were going to like a crab boil place on Sundays. I have no idea. It will be a mystery. I don't plan that far ahead. So do you have something exciting planned?
I will probably grill at some point. It's Portland, so you can never count on the weather. So I bet I will have a hamburger at some point.
Yeah. We'll probably have burgers. I may hope for ribs because that is my personal preference. But
I might do that.
I like burgers. I love ribs. So
that's an even better thing to end on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robyn.
Thank you